Welcome to Magic Gathering Strat. I am Dan and this is a Pauper Walkthrough of a deck known by many names, but a deck that is very popular right now. It's Blue-Green Fissure Post, Simic Stormpost, Rug Post, and one thing we'll do today is to decide on a name for this deck. And to do this, we have David Shaffer, known as ShaffaWaffa, with us. Hi, David.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
I'm doing good.
I bet you're thinking about evil combos to wreck the Pauper dailies.
Per usual, yeah.
And you have done so quite successfully.
Yeah, one time, one out of like a million, but yeah, one time.
Before we go into that, I'd like to ask you about your experience with Magic. When did you get started?
Yeah, so I got started in like second grade. So I don't know, 12 years ago, maybe. I can't remember exactly.
What block was that? Like Mercadian?
It was like Ice Age was kind of around. There was some Tempest going on. It was kind of hard to say because it wasn't like I was in like an after-school program type of thing during summer, and all the cool kids played Magic. And they got these boxes of like random commons, and so I don't even really know exactly what set I started at. I know there was Ice Age and a lot of like Fallen Empires and stuff, and we used to play a format that they like just made up. And I thought this was how you play Magic forever. It was called, they called it Mana Rush. So you started the games off with just like all of your lands in play, and all X damage spells and circles of protection were banned.
Oh, I wonder why that didn't become popular.
Well, it was actually pretty fun.
Well, I believe you. What have you played Magic Online for long?
Yeah, I picked up Magic Online about at Mirrodin. Or not Mirrodin, Lorwyn.
Alright.
I just tried it out. I took kind of a little bit of a break from Magic from, I kind of missed the Mirrodin block and the Kamigawa block. And then I started getting back into it and got online about Lorwyn, yeah.
Do you still play paper Magic?
Not as much as I would like. I haven't really been at a place with like a lot of my friends who play Magic in quite a while. Right now I'm in Vermont and most of my friends live in Minnesota, so paper Magic is like occasionally we'll cube or something or do a draft.
Alright. So, how did you find Pauper?
Well, I've been playing Magic forever, but I definitely would not say I've gotten any good until more recently in life. So I never really had too much money to spend on it. And I like to do a lot of limited, but I started wanting to actually like build decks because I feel like I'm kind of a Johnny player myself. So I wanted to like construct stuff, and the cheapest way to do that is Pauper.
So when did you start with Pauper?
I think I started with Pauper. It was quite a while ago. Most of the tournaments at that time were the free tournaments.
Yeah.
And the big decks were like mono you control, so it was like not like a fairy space, but they just like countered everything you did every single turn. And then played fire golems, and that was it.
Alright.
And I think there was goblins then, because that was like the one strategy that could get under that amount of counter spells. So there wasn't much going on in Pauper at that time, but it's really diversified since.
So what kind of decks have you been playing successfully before the deck we're talking about today?
Well, the truth is, none really. Like I played like a little bit of Pestilence, stuff like that. But I think for anyone who's a brewer out there, like at heart, I think they'll understand that like I'm one of those people who, unless it's like like a deck I put together, I just can't play it. Like I can try it, like I can play goblins for like testing or something, but it's just like part of what Magic is to me is like self-expression and like creative thought, and I just don't like playing stock lists of other
Yeah.
people's.
Well, the format owes people like you a lot, because there's a lot of people playing stock lists.
Well, I don't think I have nothing against people who play stock lists. I'm not one of those people who sits online and complains about like net deckers or anything like that. In fact, I think it's like one of my goals is just to make something that people want to copy.
Yeah, and so you have. Can you tell me about the history of this particular deck? But before you do that, we have to settle something here and now. What is the deck called? As there's like no institution that decides the name of Pauper decks, and this deck has like at least 3 different names I've heard of.
Uh,
So you and I are going to decide the name of the deck here, and everybody else will have to obey it.
I think the one that I've heard the most, that I like the most, is Blue-Green Fissure Post.
Blue-Green Fissure Post.
Yeah, and I think that like is a good way to describe what's going on pretty easily, because there's a couple different types of Fissure Post now that Reborn put together the blue one, and I've even seen a blue-red one too at some point.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah, and I've seen a blue-white one actually now that also popped up. So I think we could come up with some really cool name if you wanted to, and like make it like a Death and Taxes or something like that.
I was going with the Simic Stormpost before this conversation, because I had to take some name. But I think that's a very Ravnica-ish name.
I called it when I like put together the name for the list. I called it Stormpost as well. So maybe we should go Stormpost.
Well, let's go with Simic Stormpost then.
Yeah, let's do it.
The third name I heard was Rugpost, but that was the red component is very small.
Yeah.
Though critical.
The red component's like Ancient Grudges and Torches.
Yeah. Okay, how did you come up on this deck, and when?
Actually, I think that I'm really happy that you wanted to talk about this, because I think there's like a really big misconception about how to play this deck, and the history I think will show people like what I was trying to do with designing the deck, and might help people to see like better lines when they're actually playing. So this deck actually started off as like combo elves. So everyone's pretty much played like the Distant Melody deck with the elves, or at least seen it. And I was playing that, and this was the time that Empty the Warrens was everywhere. So this was, I mean, I was playing combo elves like probably 2 years ago at this point, and so I was having fun with it, but all of the stuff that killed the goblin tokens tended to kill my elves. So and everyone had that. So I wanted to go to something more resilient. So I then went to walls. I like tried using the 04 like battle rampart or something, whatever that's called. That's for a green for each creature that's a wall.
Yes.
And I had shield spheres and just all sorts of cool walls, and so they could block. They're more resilient to the sweeper type removals, but it was a little slow. So I decided I would add Temporal Fissure to it, just as a way to not because I was planning on just like returning all the permanents to their hand, but just because I could cast 5 walls in a turn in a fissure, and that would set them back considerably. And this started working pretty well, but then I like couldn't ever beat a deck with like plenty of removal, because all they really had to do was take out the important walls. And so I started. I'm like always brewing multiple decks at the same time, and another one I was using was just like a Naya landfall deck. Is why not? And I had crop rotations in it. And so I started thinking about just Cloudposts and ways to generate a ton of mana without using creatures, but keeping the Temporal Fissures, because I saw that if you can just cast a couple spells in a turn, it's usually a blowout. So I started just like putting together a shelf where with the expedition maps and the crop rotation and just some other like cheap things so that I could play 5 or 6 spells in a turn, ramp up a bunch of mana, and fissure them, and then the next turn untap and like dual monks crusher them or use the next damage spell. So that like led to the first version, which I started playing like I think probably July.
Oh, that early.
Yeah, I'm in school and I wasn't really very competitive at the time, so I put it together and I was just like dinking around with it, and I realized that when I got back out to school, I'd been doing a lot of 2-mans and it was actually a pretty good deck. So I tried it my first daily in October and I 3-1 there, but I didn't think too much of it. And then over winter break, I was like, I'll have some time to like sit and actually grind with this deck and see how it does. And I put together just like a really good run, and I just realized that the deck was super good against like everything but Storm and Infect, but I like never really ran into them. So over this period of time, so I was just putting together some pretty good numbers, and then I was kind of just like paying attention to like various changes and whatnot, and then the bans happened.
They must have been a godsend. But I see you have like 5, 6 results in January before the bannings.
Yeah. Before the bannings, like I was doing pretty well, but then right after the bannings happened, I was just cleaning up because the 2 biggest like issues were just suddenly gone. Well, and to be honest, a lot of these matchups are like 100% win, like close to like 100% wins. So, like when I was playing before, it was like matchups. It was like, oh, Infect, okay, I lose. Oh, Stompy, okay, I win. Like it just, and then suddenly it became like all Stompy. But then Affinity took over for like a couple weeks, and I realized that the deck actually is not incredibly good against Affinity the way it was at the time. So I've been working with a guy, Turbo Kitty 3000. Ooh, shout out later. And he offered a switch. He decided to put take the Explorers out, because the Explorers were generally the most underwhelming card, and add Chromatic Spheres, so that we could splash Ancient Grudges. And that was like the sole reason for this change.
Oh.
And so then after that, like our Affinity matchup went up because Ancient Grudge just dominates a funny mana base that they have.
Yeah.
And then that's when people started picking up the deck list. It was like right after this change to Chromatic Spheres. So I think a lot of people see these Chromatic Spheres and they think that like the deck, like the main deck actually needs the spheres in them, or they're like a key component to a combo or something, but really they're just a few extra cards for a splash. And so that's like how it got to where it is now. And I think that history can help people with sideboarding and with understanding that the deck is not really about like, you're not trying to lock people out with like wall fissure. It's more just like you're trying to ramp and you fissure along the way. That's sort of the idea I had the whole time.
It almost doesn't feel like a combo deck because it looks so simple. That there's no like 3-card combo happening here. It's just ramp, burn you.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, and I guess we'll talk about this more later, but the biggest issue people have playing the deck is I think that they think it's like a deck that is a combo deck, and they're like saving all their Chromatic Spheres and their Chromatic Stars for like one big turn, but they just don't have the fissure at the time, and so they're just sitting there with this script full of like cards they could use to find a fissure, but they don't, and they sit back and wait too long. But yeah, anyways, that's the history of the deck.
Yeah, let's talk about the individual cards in the main deck.
Sure.
Let's start with the mana base. You got the Cloudpost and the Cloudpost engine. And then they're from Ursa block, right? The Cycle lands.
Yeah.
Can you say something about them?
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely tried the other cycling lands, the ones that are like for color, and just realized that with this deck you often have a surplus of colorless mana. And so the cycling lands are just really great because they allow you to have access to lands if you need to on turn 1 or 2. But you can also keep them for later if you want to just draw some cards. And they're really synergistic with some other stuff in the deck. One of the big things I don't see people doing enough of when I watch their footage or play against them, for that matter, is the cycling lands make expedition maps so good, because early you get to play your expedition map and find a Cloudpost. But then once you have enough mana, your expedition maps then become just cantripping things, because you go and you find a remote isle or a slippery karst, and then you cycle those. You're thinning out your deck of land, and then you're drawing a card. And so without them, you're flooding a lot more, and you want to play fewer lands. But playing fewer lands is bad, because there's a lot of matchups when you want to hit all your land drops. So they're really good there, and they're really good also with Tilling Treefolk. So Tilling Treefolk was kind of a late addition to the sideboard, and because I realized that the only way I could really ever lose to blue-red Cloudpost is through land destruction. And it wasn't even like that the land destruction was crippling, it was just that it took me so long to like recover that I would actually eventually just deck myself. So I added the Tilling Treefolk to the sideboard, but now I bring them in even against like if I run into a mono blue control list like what I was describing earlier with that's not really focused on fairies, I'll bring the Tilling Treefolks in then too, because they're kind of like mini Mulldrifters if you can bring back 2 cycling lands from the graveyard.
Nice. The amount of lands, 22. Would you rather go 23 than 21?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely thought at times that I wanted 23 lands, and I played for a period of time a Bojuka Bog in the sideboard, and part of the reason why I played that was not even for the effect, but just because in general the decks I wanted the extra land against, or in general the decks I wanted the effect against also wanted an extra land. So some matchups it's really important to hit your land drops. And I hate keeping. In fact, I generally do my best. I'll even mulligan from 5 to 4 sometimes to make sure that I have 2 lands in hand instead of 1. When a lot of decks do just fine on 1.
Yeah. So what are your like internal mulligan plan? What kind of hand would you like to see?
This is like I think this is what separates like a good pilot from like someone just picking the deck up. And I think that this is generally the case with a lot of decks, but maybe more so with this one than any other, because a lot of hands that seem completely keepable actually aren't. So like a hand that's like Island, Forest, Chromatic Sphere, Compulsive Research, something else, that's like unkeepable in my opinion against a lot of decks, because it's just too slow. Which you have to have faith in this deck, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but you have to have faith that you're going to draw into the big card draw spells eventually, because you're gonna if you can thin your deck out enough. So I want to keep a hand that's like, maybe preferably a Cloudpost and like a Glimmerpost. But if I don't have one of those, I want to have a max amount of like crop rotations and maps, and then like maybe a Prophetic Prism. But a hand with a bunch of Mulldrifters and a bunch of Compulsives, even if you have the mana to cast it, is not going to get you there.
All right. Regarding the Mulldrifters, how often do you win by Mulldrifter damage?
Once in a blue moon. They are relevant with dealing damage, because if you can get in 2 hits with it, then suddenly the amount of like lands you need for a Kaervek's Torch becomes so much lower. Like you need 3 Cloudposts and 2 Glimmerposts to burn someone out from 16. And so those 2 attack steps are actually pretty relevant, because sometimes finding that last Cloudpost can be difficult. And often I don't really like to go like just for Cloudposts, like straight up getting them first and then trying to get a Glimmerpost. Sometimes I will, but usually I'm trying to diversify across the 2, because if they're playing aggro, I'm going to need the life back at some point. So the Mulldrifters are definitely, they're useful for putting in a couple points of damage, but it's pretty rare that I kill with them, because eventually, if I'm swinging with Mulldrifter, I'm usually drawing a lot of cards, and so I'll get to my torch.
Do you evoke them often?
50-50, I guess. I don't really ever want to evoke them, but some matchups, it's just completely right. Like, in the mirror, it's so important to dig to your Temporal Fissures. Like, that's one matchup where Fissure really, really matters, that losing the 2 extra colorless mana to try to cast it is often incorrect. So you want to dig as quickly as you can and use your mana as efficiently as possible to get to the fissures or the other cards you need, like Crop Rotation or Ghostly Flicker.
Yeah.
So, but some matchups I want to be casting it, like pretty much against any aggro. I like him as like a chump blocker. Sometimes if you have a Moment's Peace, you can then use the Mulldrifter to induce, like you block with the Mulldrifter on some guy that they want to keep, but they're attacking with anyways, and you waste a pump spell, so then you 1-for-1 them with your Moment's Peace and also prevent all damage.
Yeah.
So I think they're really useful. Some people don't like them, I've talked to, because they're expensive. They're often, for some people, they're just often divinations, and sometimes they turn on removal. So like Searing Blaze against Burn, that card is usually a dead card, but Mulldrifters do turn that on. So I have seen some people move away from it, and it doesn't really comport with my play style, but I can respect it if you do that, I guess.
The reason I asked was because I just listened to Pauper to the People episode 104, and Mikey K has been playing this deck quite a bit, and he was dropping the Mulldrifters.
Yeah, one of my friends also dropped them for accumulated knowledge.
Okay.
And he likes that. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of ways. Like, even though I think that in general I'm not playing to try to fissure them out, I'm trying to torch them out. I think that there are definitely times in which you do want to be playing to fissure people out, and if your playstyle is more that way, I don't think it's necessarily like, incorrect. And so if you are trying to combo, then you do want a cheaper card draw spell than a Mulldrifter.
Yeah. I think he dropped them for Preordains, actually.
Yeah,
in his list.
And I think that's okay. I really like the Mulldrifter a lot. It's like always a 3-for-1 if you hard cast the thing. So
It's hard not to respect that.
Yeah. I think the reason why people don't like it the most is because you can't keep hands like I was talking about before with them. It's like another, if you have like Mulldrifter, Compulsive Research, then you're going to probably mulligan that hand unless you have like Cloudpost, Prophetic Prism as your other card.
Yeah.
But, and so maybe you want a more consistent card that you can keep more often. And I can get behind all these choices, and maybe it's something that the deck should trend towards, but I kind of feel that if you want to go in more of like a combo-y approach to this deck, then the mono blue fissure post deck, Stormpost deck, might be a better fit, because that's all they're trying to do. Their deck is entirely around comboing.
Yeah. So what's your favorite target for your Ghostly Flicker?
Oh, Ghostly Flicker is an interesting card. It's sort of like a utility card. And we used to run 2. That came in the more recent change that we dropped down to 1. And 2 is occasionally too much because sometimes you just don't have targets that you want to hit. But if I think the number one target I hit with it is Glimmerpost, because I want to be gaining life with it pretty aggressively. It's a card I will use to get with Mulldrifter, and if I need to with a wall, but it's kind of just like a utility card. It's nice to have access to something so flexible. And in some matchups, it really shines, like in the mirror or any deck with land destruction in it. It's really a great card because it saves your lands. If they try to fissure you, then you get to get 2 lands and then usually untap with them and then fissure them back. So I guess more often than not, when I want to go Ghostly Flicker, its purpose is to protect my lands or hit lands.
Yeah, it happened to me. I played Burn against Simic Stormpost a few days ago, and he saved his Cloudpost with Ghostly Flicker and got some lives in the process. Pretty annoying. Why did you go down to 1?
So there were a lot of times in which I would find myself having a hand which was Ghostly Flicker, and like a Prophetic Prism and no other really good target. And all I really wanted to do was draw some cards with it, use it as a Compulsive Research or as a Mulldrifter or something like that.
Yeah.
And it just would sit in my hand. So having 2 of them, I just found was problematic, especially since it's just a utility card. It's not something I'm actively trying to use too often. I think I've seen a lot of people trying to up the Ghostly Flicker count in the deck, and those are people who are, again, really focused on the fissuring aspect, and they want to flicker their walls to try to get a decent storm count up. But without like Cloud of Fairies in the deck, Ghostly Flicker is just I don't know. It's not like a really powerful card. It's just like a good card. So I didn't want 2 of them. I might consider putting 1 in the sideboard though, because they are pretty good against the mirror.
Yeah. And then 3 Temporal Fissure.
Yeah. That's another one of those things where it's about getting them stuck in your hand. Some matchups, Temporal Fissure is terrible. Like it does nothing, and or very little. And so I guess I just don't like having too many of them, because you often just have them jammed up in your hand and nothing you want to cast them on. And you'd rather just have card filtration or some kind of card draw.
Yeah.
So some people are up to 4. And I don't think that's necessarily terrible or anything, but I haven't really found myself lacking for a Temporal Fissure, aside from instances in which, like, I'm in the mirror and it would be really great to get to that Temporal Fissure, but for whatever reason, my deck has decided to put them all in the bottom half of my library. So then maybe the fourth would have helped, but usually if you want one, you can get to one by the time that you can cast it.
Yeah, I think this looks like a classic case of 3 cards, actually, that the number should be 3. Makes a lot of sense to me. So, Compulsive Research.
Yeah. This guy's good. This is another synergistic card with Tilling Treefolk too, just to throw that out there.
I believe you.
And it's good. I think the biggest thing going for it is that it's 3 mana. 4C is obviously like a much better card, but I want to be able to cast something that's cheap. And I do admit that the pitching lands is kind of uncomfortable at times because you want to keep your lands, you want to hit your land drops. But in general, it's been really good to me. So I don't think that there's a card draw spell I would switch with it.
It looks to be the choice of the card of choice to draw cards in Cloudpost decks overall. So, yeah. So, Mnemonic Wall. 1 wall.
Yeah, so I think having this in the list confuses so many people. They don't, I think that they see the wall and they just think like, oh, I'm going to lock them. Like, just go for the lock every single time. And you just have 1 wall, so like, I don't think that that's a very reliable strategy. And I don't think I would ever play 2 walls, because just going for the lock just seems so overly difficult.
Yeah, you're not there for the lock. You're there to burn phase, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I'll probably keep like just hammering this home, because I honestly think this is the #1 mistake people make. And some people do want to play for the lock. Like my friend Turbo Kitty, he does really like playing for the lock, and he has moved up the number of walls at times. But in general, I think that people try to get too cute with the walls. They try to do all this locking stuff, and usually if you just keep drawing cards and then torch someone, it's just better and faster, and you don't have to worry about time constraints. But the reason why the wall is in the deck is because you do want access sometimes to be able to lock someone late in the game. That's #1, especially against like other types of Cloudpost decks and Fissure decks. The #2 reason it's in there is it's kind of just an extra copy of all of your instants and sorceries. I mean, that might sound like pretty self-evident, but it's in there so that if you happen to need another Fissure and there's one in your graveyard, now you have access to it. It's there in case you had to use your torches to burn out a couple of Ninja of the Deep hours early on in the game. Then you can have access to them again. And it's there if you need a crop rotation to beat a capsize. So it's really just another one of those really flexible cards like Ghostly Flicker that lets you have access to all of the spells that you've already casted.
Talking about crop rotation.
Yeah, so crop rotation is one of the best cards in the deck.
It looks to be the reason to be green, right?
Yeah, it's actually probably the #2 reason to be green. The #1 reason is Moment's Peace. But crop rotation is really, really good. And it's better than people realize, I think, because it's one of the reasons definitely to splash the extra color over the mono blue version. So crop rotation against like the mono blue version is basically another effective copy of Cloudpost, right? And I think that that's what people see crop rotation in the list for, is just like an extra copy of Cloudpost. But it's so much more than that, because the sacrifice ability is so relevant in almost every single context. Like, it's really good if someone's going for capsize against you. Like, if they target your Cloudpost with a capsize, you can crop rotation your post and just sacrifice it, and it just counters their capsize. Like even if they bought it back, it's still gone. And then you can go find another copy of Cloudpost that doesn't set you back at all. It's really good against the mirror as well. Like if I am getting to a point in the game when I think that my opponent's going to try to fissure me, I'll usually try to keep up a crop rotation, even if I could maybe get an extra post, because if he tries to fissure me, then I can sacrifice my Cloudpost, find another Cloudpost, on my turn untap it, and hopefully fissure him back to get all of his permanents. So that's another like way it's really good defensively. And then the sacrifice clause matters in a few other ways, because you can counter your opponent's Reap and Sow if they try to do that, if they try to blow up your land and to entwine it. And it also just like by sacrificing like your land, it'd be the same thing. So if someone's trying to Stone Rain your Cloudpost, you can sacrifice your Cloudpost and find another Cloudpost, which just, I mean, didn't exactly say counter the Stone Rain, but it basically did. You are down a Cloudpost in your library, but usually that's not that big of a deal.
How much does that matter if you do that twice? Wouldn't that hurt you?
It depends. I kind of feel like this deck needs 2 Cloudposts to win ultimately.
Okay.
But last night I won with 1. I was playing against a mono green post player, and he was just on the mono land destruction plan, and he did actually get me in the match. But in this particular game, I was able to crop rotation enough of his targets away that I had 1 post left, 1 Cloudpost. I had a Mulldrifter in play, and then I got the lockdown on him. So just having 1 Cloudpost was enough to, and enough other lands was enough to keep him locked down and to win with the Mulldrifter.
Nice.
So it's definitely relevant, but I mean, if they're going to Stone Rain your Cloudpost, you might as well use your crop rotation to sacrifice the thing that's going to die anyways. You get better value there.
Yep.
And the last good thing about crop rotation is you're 2-for-1ing yourself. And so this is such like a good value to Delver players. So you have to be careful here, but sometimes crop rotation is like the perfect bait, because if they have a spell service right in hand and they can only counter 1 thing in a turn, and you don't need the extra mana, but they're just not that aware of that, you can crop rotation. They are gonna counter it with that spell starter. So
Yes.
Insane. And then you can fissure them, go off like crazy. So it's a really good card that I use in a lot of different ways. But yeah, the other thing to say about it too, and maybe I'll talk about this later with it, is against like an unknown opponent, if you have a forest and a crop rotation and you're gonna find a Cloudpost, you're on the play, just do it. Because getting a crop rotation dazed is like the worst feeling ever.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
So be careful when you use it.
Then we have another singleton card, the Marauder.
Yeah, so the Marauder is a card kind of like Tilling Treefolk, where I've kind of taken a situation in a game that's like very specific and tried to find a sideboard card to fit that certain slot. Like a lot of people, they go, oh, I'm having difficulty against Affinity. I need to add a bunch of artifact removal or something like that. Or I'm having trouble against goblins. I'm going to add Circle of Protection Red. But sometimes you need to pay more attention to an issue in general. So like with Affinity, I was having trouble against them, but I wasn't having trouble against Affinity. I was having trouble against Autog plus Disciple.
Yep.
And so I tried adding the Fangren Marauders to the sideboard, because if you land him, then Autog plus Disciple equals just a net 4 life for you.
It looks like a horrible card to face with Affinity.
Yeah, and actually, it often they'll have like a huge amount of creatures out, and I'll play 1 Fangren Marauder, and they just like pause, and then they just don't attack the rest of the game because it is a 5/5, so all their 4/4s can't trade with it. Whenever they attack with like a 4/4, unless they're like dealing lethal to me that turn, I'm gonna gain most of the life back anyways after the block, and they have to 2/4 on themselves to kill it because their best removal spell is Gallop Blast, which just does 4 damage. So it's really good against them. And yeah, it was so good against them that I started thinking maybe I should start bringing them in against like other decks. I mean, it's just you have enough like little cantripping things that I started bringing them in against Stompy and Goblins and other things like that, and really was impressed with him. And then when we made that switch to this new version with the extra the spears instead of the explorers for the Ancient Grudges,
Yep.
I just realized that the Fangren Marauder hedges so well against aggro decks in general that having these extra 4 cantripping artifacts is just gonna kill some decks. Just if you get the Marauder down and do it, it brings you back so much life. And since it is 6 mana, I just have one of them. But it's really good, and sometimes the 5 damage is really relevant too, because again, like that just means you need fewer lands to torch them out in the end.
Yep.
So he's really good. If he wasn't 6 mana, I'd probably play 2.
He did put my... he stopped me when I was playing Delver, just because of... he gained 15 lives and I had to start all over.
Yeah, it's like incredible against Burn too, because their whole plan is
Yeah, that's even sick. That's that's too hard. Okay, Moments Piece. 2 of them in the main deck.
Yeah, so this also came in the more recent tweak we had. Before the ban, I would never have considered playing Moments Piece main, because there was so much Storm and there was so much Cloudpost. I just thought, I don't want 2 cards that could conceivably be dead in my main deck. But the more I've played this deck, the more I've realized that Cloudpost game 1 is like almost unlosable if you're playing against the blue-red version.
Yeah.
So like even having 2 extra cards that don't really do anything there is fine. Like it doesn't really matter because you're still gonna win. And they're not even that bad against like Cloudpost, because you can cast 2 copies of the spell, and so you can make your fissure just a little bit better with them. So they're not that bad. In the matchups that they're not very good, they're not that bad. And in the matchups where they are good, they're insane. So against like any aggro deck, they're like a double time block, pretty much. Any aggro deck besides Burn, I guess. They're like a double time block, and often they're just better than Temporal Fissure. Because if you're playing Temporal Fissure like how I do, I use it basically as a really big fog a lot of the time. I return all of their creatures to their hand, and then it takes them a turn or 2 to replay them. Moments Piece basically says, I'm not returning all your creatures to your hand, but you can't do anything to me for 2 turns, which is usually enough time to draw into another Moment Piece once you board the other 2 in. So it's the best green card in the deck and in the 75. In fact, it might be the best like green card in Pauper right now, and it's the biggest reason to me why I want to play this version over the mono blue version.
Yeah. That's a good work. That's a lot of work from a fog.
Yeah, it's incredible how good it is.
Yeah. I don't know if I have... do you have anything to say about 4 expedition maps? They look pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, they are. Again, remember you can cycle or you can find a cycling land with it, which is really big. Yeah.
First get the posts as long as you can, and then get cycle lands.
Yeah. For sure.
Prisms. Great flicker targets. Normal Cloudpost abuse.
Prism's like the most important artifact. Like, you really want to get them out there. You want them to stay alive if you can. But yeah, they're great flicker targets. They're pretty obvious, I think. But one of the big things with them too that you should keep in mind is sometimes knowing what to Temporal Fissure is really hard. And if you're in a situation in which you just went off with your fissure and you have no cards in hand, and you have the option of returning some random creature that's going to do nothing to you, or your Prophetic Prism, then you should probably return your own Prism, so then you can start the card draw again in order to get to the next fissure or to the torch.
Yeah. I see some blue-red Cloudpost decks dropping to 3 prisms.
I could see that for them. It's not as important with their decks because they're like turn 1 play Island or like a Gate or something, preordained. Turn 2 play a Mountain, and then later on they'll cast their Cloudpost. They're not really trying to like ramp into their Cloudposts like we are. And so we're going to be sacrificing our colored mana in order to make these sacrifices. And we're either going to be sacrificing our colored mana through like ordering our plays or through literally sacrificing them with crop rotation.
Yeah.
So we're not going to have as much colored mana out there to cast our spells. So we really need to get our prisms out there.
That's an important part. You're willing to give up every island and forest to put more posts into play, right?
A lot of the times, yeah. I mean, definitely if you think that they have artifact removal, do not rely too heavily on your prisms, even if it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to the amount of mana you need. But because losing a prism can just be so crippling if all of your colored mana is based on your prisms.
Yeah.
So, in general, yeah, you're pretty okay finding your Cloudposts by sacrificing your colored lands. But if you think that they have hate, I'm less likely to do it.
All right. And then we have the 8 spheres and stars.
Yeah. So, first thing to say about them is stars are better than spheres. And the reason for this is the stars have this clause where if they're put in their graveyard, you get to draw a card. And if the sphere is put in your graveyard, you don't, unless you're cracking it. So this is really relevant because there's a lot of times in which you have an extra mana to spare, and you want to leave a star in place so you can crack it the next turn. And you have this choice between sphere and star. So you want to leave out the stars, and so you want to be hanging on to your spheres because sometimes people do stuff where like they'll randomly play that gorilla shaman and then just decide that they want to blow up your trinket because they think that will negatively impact you. And sometimes it does if it's a sphere. So keep that in mind. It's also really relevant for like again if your opponent lands an Ulamog's Crusher, then you want to put your stars out there. Because then you'll just draw a card back. But in general, these cards are kind of just like a little bit of cantripping, a little bit of color fixing, cheap spells that help dig you through the cards you want and help you cast them.
I think that was the one thing that impressed me the most with the deck when I first played against it, that the speed in which it just went through the library.
Yeah, it goes really quickly. And if you're playing the deck properly, then you're playing your stars, you're cracking them, even if you don't have things to cast really, because it's so important to dig through the deck quickly. You'll get to the stuff you want.
Alright, and then we have the main burn spell, Kaervek's Torch.
Yeah, so Torch is a choice I made over Rolling Thunder, and I think that that's really the only discussion I have. Because 2 red is a heck of a lot more red than 1 red. And since I want to be trying to kill them as quickly as possible, I want to be able to kill them if I have 4 Cloudposts, a Glimmerpost, and a Prophetic Prism. I don't want to be dinking around with that extra mana and trying to make it red. So Even though Rolling Thunder can like wipe a board out, I definitely think Torch is the better option. Even though Torch is currently glitched on mine, and has been since I've been playing the deck, despite numerous times of emailing them and complaining, and getting comped on occasion.
What is the glitch?
The glitch is Kaervek's Torch has this clause where your opponent can't counter it unless they pay 2 colorless additionally. So with the Temporal Fissure deck, it's like should be pretty safe to be able to fissure their lands away, and then let them play their island, and then you should then be able to untap and torch them and not have your spell be countered. But for whatever reason, the glitch like lets them counter it without having to pay this extra 2.
Oh
Which is a
no.
really big pain in the butt because sometimes there's like red elemental blast that they could have, or maybe it's not that one, the Hydro Blast.
Yeah.
And so if they have Hydro Blast, they just sit there and you really have to work hard to play around it in order to beat this glitch. Because what you then have to do is fissure on your first main phase, and then shift over to your second main phase, and hopefully have enough mana to then torch them out.
Oh.
Which is really a big pain in the butt. And actually, I almost timed out the other day because I had to play around this. So it's really a pain. So I really wish they would fix that, but I still think Torch is the better option over the Rolling Thunder. And I guess the other option would be Mnemonic Crusher. And I used to run 2 of those. We took them out because Cloudpost has been decreasing, and so have been the other types of fissure decks where a early Crusher can actually be pretty devastating. I've found in general that I don't miss the Crusher, and I actually kind of prefer Fangren Marauder over it because in a lot of matchups, it's better to have a blocker than a 8/8 that has to attack every turn, even if they have to sacrifice a couple things.
Yeah, Fangren looks a lot better, I think. I've seen some people play 1 torch or even 3.
I guess I used to play with 1 because I just wanted to go find that as my win con. But I like to, like I've been saying, I like to rant into my wins and my torches, and I don't want to have to like get the appropriate amount of mana and then hope that my torch isn't in the bottom half of my library. I want to be able to have access to 1 pretty easily. And the thing that really was compelling to me was that I actually torch a fair number of creatures early on in the game. So if I have 1, it's not like a dead card in my hand. It's usually killing like a Ninja of the Deep Hours or maybe a Cycle of the Vault, something like that. And they're really cool when you're trying to fissure off in a turn 2 because if you're trying to fissure against like Delver or something, you crack a red, or crack a sphere to make a red, and then you torch a Phantasmal Bear for 0, and then you fissure the rest of their board. So it's not a bad card to have early. So I definitely like 2 over 1. But it is not the greatest card to have in your hand. So I'd rather have 2 than 3.
Looks reasonable. You mentioned Alamog's Crusher. Any other cards that have been in the main deck or that you have considered and not taken in?
So we used to have Explorers in the main deck, and Explorer was a good card. It was a little clunky with the mana base, which is the thing I didn't like about the most. And for every game that it like accelerated you ahead, it did nothing another game. So it was like pretty iffy. I did like it, and if you aren't playing Ancient Grudges, I actually think if you are playing Ancient Grudges and you are playing the Fangren main, then I would probably put the Explorers back in over the Chromatic Sphere.
Okay.
So that's one thing. Another thing to discuss, I guess, is the Ponder preordained discussion that we were having earlier.
Yeah.
I think that if you were going to play one of those cards, it should be probably over Mulldrifter. I I could see putting it in over the spheres, but if I'm drawing cards, I want to be drawing a lot of cards. I want to be like compulsiving or multidrifting. I don't think it's that important to be filtering through the top of your library. I have tried these cards before, and I've been kind of underwhelmed with them because, in general, on my early turns, I don't have colored mana. So I'd rather just wait till I have access to colored mana to cast something bigger and better.
Yeah.
And I guess if you do have access to colored mana, maybe you might not be keeping the right types of hands, or it's not the greatest hand. So I guess I can see how it would make you more consistent, because then you could keep slightly worse hands, but I don't know. I'd rather just cast bigger things than them.
I like it.
Yeah. Another thing I see a lot of is Reaping So in people's decks.
Yes.
And that card baffles me. I haven't even tried it because I just see like no reason for it at all. I could maybe get behind it a little bit in the sideboard slot. I could sort of understand it, but I think it's just kind of silly because there's really no decks you want to be destroying lands against game one, besides like the Mirror or Cloudpost. And if you're doing it against Cloudpost, I'd rather just be ramping into a really big fear. And if you're doing it against like Mirror, you really run the risk of getting blown out. In fact, I kind of like it when my opponents try to reconcile me, because that usually means that they've spent 6 mana because they're trying to get a Cloudpost of their own. They're tapped out, and then I get to just untap them and trigger them back if I have the crop rotation or the ghostly flicker to counter it. So I haven't been too impressed with the Mirror either. And the only other clause on it is it can help you go find your Cloudpost, but I think the second biggest mistake people make when playing this deck is they get too much colorless mana. I see so many people cast like Reaping So's and stuff where they're getting their 4th Cloudpost, but they already have 2 Glimmerposts or maybe 3 Glimmerposts, and so they have like 7 posts out and like an island and a Prophetic Prism. So they're just going to run out of colored mana before they run out of colorless mana. So why not go get another colored mana or something like that? Or why even cast this card to go find a land? You don't need it. So I haven't really had too much difficulty getting to the number of posts I want to get to, which is usually 5 or 6. And I don't want to get to more than that. And so Reaping So is just, it doesn't do anything really, in my opinion. It doesn't do enough for kind of a lot of mana. So I don't really like it that much. Then there's also always people ask me about Clouded Fairies and Snap, why I'm not playing those.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they're bad cards. I would rather play Clouded Fairies over Snap, because sometimes Snap has no target, and that's really annoying. It just sits there. And it's because Pauper Fairies can cycle. But when I have tried these cards, I ended up usually just cycling the fairies away. I think you can, of course, set up flicker combos and do all sorts of cool blocking things by playing them. But the first thing that happens is your mana base gets a little worse by adding additional blue over like Explorer or something like that. Not that that's a huge deal. But the second thing is neither of those cards draw cards. So once you pass them, like you need to have access to a Mulldrifter and a Ghostly Flicker and a wall to start digging through your back. But the biggest thing for me is, again, I'm not trying to trigger them. Like, if you're trying to play Cloud of Fairies and Snap, I think that you should probably just focus on the mono blue version. And I think that's why the mono blue version came to be. Because
that I just would rather try to torch someone as quickly as possible. And I think that in general, it's better to try to torch someone as quickly as possible than tinker around with some cards that aren't going to draw you a card, and really are only good if they land and aren't countered. So sometimes I feel like Cloud of Fairies, decks that rely on Cloud of Fairies, really need to make sure that Cloud of Fairies lands in order to get a good trigger off.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in a position where I need to rely on a card that's pretty easily counterable. So I chose not to play those, and I'm pretty happy with it. I might sideboard Cloud of Fairies if other Temporal Fissure decks got popular, because they do speed you up a turn. You need to figure early.
I often play blue-black Trinket control, and this is by far the worst matchup. And the first time I played the deck, I played against Simic Stormpost. I was sitting with Tragic Slips and Fume Spitters stuff, just waiting for the Cloud of Fairies, and it never came. And it's like, oh, well, then I can't stop it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to give my opponents the ability to prevent me from doing my game plan.
Yeah.
And I feel like playing Cloud of Fairies does that. And to a certain extent, Snap does too, because I just don't have enough guys. Like, they can just choose not to play their guys if they want.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that, I definitely think that the mono blue version has a place. I don't think it's bad at all. I think I would just, against most metas, prefer to play my version, because I think that my version is good against all the decks that their version is good against, and our deck generally tends to beat their deck, I think.
I tend to agree. I've tried the mono blue version much more than I've tried this, and I found the aggro matchups a bit problematic, and of course it's a much more combo-ish deck. But I like this just ramp big fireball thing. It's good.
And they don't have Moment Speed, which I think is like
Exactly.
difficult thing. It's just like they don't have Moment Speed, and they don't really have access to like, they do have a couple more flickers, but crop rotation is really big in aggro deck matchups, because then at any instant you can go and find another Glimmerpost to gain a bunch of life.
Yes.
So full screen cards, I think, are really good against aggro, and I mean, I would prefer to play this deck under most situations. But I think today I did see that for the first time, the mono blue version had more people piloting it to success than the mono green version.
Oh.
So that was interesting.
All right.
And I think that actually has to do with a lot of people wanting to play a combo deck and realizing eventually that the blue-green version isn't going to get you the locked version of a win that you might be desiring.
That's very true. Are there any tricks or things you should think about in the main deck that we haven't mentioned?
Well, I think one of the big ones is the Grotto, Shimmering Grotto. That's a card that I like to touch up a lot with crop rotations. Because once I have enough mana, pretty much Shimmering Grotto is the next thing I go to. Because it is flexible, it gets you green or blue if you need it, but it also gets you red. So by getting this Grotto, you hedge against strategy that might have brought in Artifact Hate to take out your Prophetic Prisms. And although Artifact Hate's not as big of a deal now, now that there's like 12 artifacts that can make red,
Yeah.
it's still really nice to have access to a way to make red that's not an artifact. So that's one of the things. And there was, so I wanted to mention one other kind of like tricky play that you can do too, which is against goblins. I'll bring in Fangren Marauder and Fadeaways.
Yep.
And so remember that in an instance like this, if you have a Prophetic Prism out and you need a couple extra life, you can choose not to pay with your Fadeaway for your Fangren Marauder and then sacrifice one of your prisms to gain 5 life. So that's one of the little tips I saw that I haven't discussed. And I guess in general, the biggest tip I just want to tell people is if they want to play like my style, is play your stars, play your spheres, crack them early and often, and don't try to save up for big fissures. Like, the way the deck works is because you're filtering out so many lands, each draw you have is going to get like more explosive as the game proceeds. So more often than not, you get into situations in which, yeah, you have cracked a lot of stars and you have cracked a lot of spheres and maybe you haven't figured yet, but then you'll draw a sphere and you'll play the sphere and then you'll crack it, and then it'll chain you into some like incredible number of spells until you can fissure. And that's the way the deck works, because we're crop rotating and we're mapping. All of our like dead land draws are like being pulled out of our deck, and so we just want to continue this filtration system until we can amass a fissure. And I think if you, a lot of people play a little bit too hesitantly, because they'll want some extra spells to play with their fissure. If you play a little bit too hesitantly, you're going to lose more, I think, than you need to.
One strength of this version of Temporal Fissure decks is that you don't have to do as many clicks. You don't have to, if you don't go infinite with Cloud of Fairies and like Familiar Storm. Is time often an issue?
No, I very rarely run into time. Like I said, the other day I ran into time as an issue, but that was mainly because I was streaming this game, and I had some streaming issues, so I spent the first like 7 minutes of the match thinking around with that. But in general, I like never run into time. Granted, I've been playing this deck for quite a while now, so I have kind of like the motions down. But I'm not trying to lock people, and when you're locking, that's usually the stuff that takes the longest.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't run into time all that often.
I had a Simic Stormpost player time out against me when I was playing Delver, but it was also because he was streaming and lagging because of the stream.
That happens, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, let's go into matchups then, and then we'll discuss the sideboard while doing the matchups.
Yeah, I'll try to do this quickly. I know we've been talking for quite a while here.
I think we're getting excellent quality material here, so I'm not in any time rush here. I hate when they finish good walkthroughs early, so yeah. Okay. So don't feel a need to rush.
I'll start with Delver. Might as well start with like the big ones.
Okay.
So, I find that this matchup is in our favor, but it is a matchup that's really skill intensive. And if you just picked up this deck, you are going to lose to Delver, and you are going to lose hard, because it's just really difficult to navigate the way to play it. And to be honest, like the way to navigate to play it is like kind of by feel. Like you need to realize that if they get out a turn 1 Delver and flip it, and or like a turn 2 Ninja on the play, you are going to need to play really aggressively, like how I tend to do so. But if you have time, then maybe it's better to actually, in this instance, to save a star or a sphere till a turn you're trying to go off, because then you might be able to like induce a spell strutter out of him, and then that stacks for your Temporal Fissure, and so then you can get more of the permanency you want to get. You gotta play really careful and do a lot of tricks. So like you want to bait them as much as possible. And I actually saw this guy named Regimank22 or something. I was watching one of his videos. Well, it wasn't a video, I guess. I just saw one of his replays.
Yeah.
And he had a really cool play against Delver. And it's stuff like this you need to do that's creative, where he had a Mulldrifter return to it, snapped back to his hand, and then on his turn, he really wanted to land an expedition map. But so the way he did this was he tapped, he played a Chromatic Sphere, and he cracked it for blue, and then he tapped a bunch of his mana to show like he's going to recast the Mulldrifter, which his opponent did not want him to land. And then he just played one expedition map. And then his opponent did not counter the map, even though he wanted the map. And then he cracked the map, found his land, and then just passed the turn. So sometimes you have to do stuff like that, like represent like you're going to do something crazy this turn, and if they don't counter the right thing, then they're going to lose. But the more difficult, the match is really dependent on the strength of both pilots. And I would say in general, the average Delver player is like gonna do okay. So probably like 50-50, but you're gonna, well, I think against the average Delver player, you have an advantage. Against a really good Delver player, like Rick P and Mezel, I'm like 2 and 5 against them or something. So it's really dependent on the strength of the matchup, but I think that the strength of the opponent's play, but it is that is relevant. The other thing that's kind of relevant in this matchup is the style of the blue deck. If you can pick that out, it's hard to tell sometimes. But the X-Mimics decks are actually easier to beat than like the Mezel or Ricky style, because those decks have a bigger reliance on creatures and tend to tap out a little bit more.
Yep.
And so if you can get them to tap out in games 2 and 3, then you can bring Fadeaway in and wipe out all their guys, which is pretty nice. So with the sideboarding in this matchup, I add 2 Fadeaway, 2 Deep Analysis. I take out a Fangren, 2 Moments Peace, and a Chromatic Sphere. And
repeat that. Sorry.
Yeah. So I add 2 Fadeaway.
Yeah.
2 Deep Analysis. I take out 1 Fangren, 2 Moments Peace, and Chromatic Sphere.
Yeah.
I don't really like Moments Peace in this matchup because they're not like a normal aggro deck where they're like trying to like all in you and then they'll run out of cards. They're like, they'll do 5 damage to you, and then the next turn they'll do 5 damage to you, and they don't really care all that much. It's not as bad for them to let you have an extra turn as it is for a lot of other decks.
And of course you can't rely on being able to cast the Moment Space.
Yeah, exactly. If it is actually a big deal for them, then they'll just counter it.
Yeah.
So that is, it's not my favorite against them.
I thought that Simic Stormpost was basically the reason that Delver is the #1 deck right now.
I actually wouldn't be surprised with that, because I think, again, a lot of people are just picking the deck up just like now. They've never really played it before. And so they're not gonna, like, I feel like when you pick up Simic Stormpost, if you play it wrong, you're still probably gonna win a lot of your games, because what it's doing is so powerful.
Yeah.
Like, even if you mess up a Temporal Fissure and cast like 1 fewer spell than you could have, like that's still really crippling to most decks. So I don't think Delver is a bad matchup. It's just a skill-intensive matchup. And so if you're not winning, keep practicing. You'll get there. And I've seen other people make some cool sideboard moves, which I think are pretty good and worth consideration. Some people have Serrated Arrows, and other people have White Widow.
Yeah.
And if Delver becomes like a big enough issue for you, then maybe try adding those to the sideboard.
Yeah, that was the way the Simic Stormpost deck that I clocked. He was winning with Blight Widows. So he completely locked me out with Blight Widows, and then he timed out.
Oh. Yeah, they're good. I think that, like, if Simic Stormpost had like a spider that had hexproof, like a 1-3 spider or something like that, like, I don't think the deck. I think the deck would be absolutely the best deck in the format.
Yeah.
Because you just wouldn't lose to Delver anymore.
So against the more defensive is maybe the wrong word, but against the Delver deck that wants to counter more, like Mesel's, you still bring in the fadeaways?
I do, because one of the things, like, on the Pauper to the People forum, there's like a discussion about what's good to bring in right now against Delver in this matchup, and everyone's talking about, like, in theory fadeaway is good, but they'll just like tap the mana and stuff like that. But the truth is, part of what makes fadeaway good is that they do tap the mana. It's a spell where if they have 4 mana up, they could conceivably have 2 counter spells. But if you cast Fade Away and they have 3 creatures, usually they'll just tap the mana. So it taps them out, and so then you can start playing your other stuff. And sometimes it's really good like that. Sometimes you just cast it to do that. And against like a Mezzle deck, I tend to use Fade Away more in that way.
That makes sense.
If the Mezzle versions got more popular, then I probably would try to do some tweaking, because I actually think that version is like a lot more difficult, and Fade Away is not that great against them, so I'd probably look to like a Blight Widow or something.
Okay.
You can, but just be careful, I guess, with your crop rotations and stuff like that. So, but Affinity is the next matchup.
Yep.
And so against them, it's kind of hard to give you really, really great numbers on how favorable I am with this, because I don't keep track of my results like a lot of other people do. I just kind of go by feel.
Okay.
And Affinity is now, in my opinion, favorable. It wasn't before we made these switches to Ancient Grudges, but now I think it is. And but I haven't had enough play testing really to say for certain, but I definitely find myself winning a lot more lately.
Yeah.
But against them, I bring in 4 Ancient Grudge, 1 Fangren Marauder, and 2 Moments Peace. And I actually take out Flicker, 3 Fissures, a Wall, and 2 Shield Spheres.
Ah.
Not Shield.
So Flicker, Wall, Fissure.
And 2 Spheres. So I take out all 3 Fissures. And some people might think this is crazy, but because sometimes you actually can get them really good with Fissure, but they often have a lot of like random junk out on the field. Like they'll have a Drum and like a Chromatic Star and a bunch of stuff you don't really care about. And so when you do figure them, since we're not like the mono blue version,
Yeah.
we'll have like seven targets we can pick. So we'll return their Mirror Enforcer, their other Mirror Enforcer, a Frogmite, like all these things, and then they'll untap them, like we cast them all. Because you can't actually get all their stuff back there. So I haven't really found Figure to be good against them.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so I'd rather have just like a better business spell, which is Ancient Grudge, and try to slow them down, because often you can just land a Fangren Marauder and the game's over. And Fangren Marauder works pretty well too with an Ancient Grudge also, because you gain 5 life every time you blow something up. So
That's unfair.
yeah, this transformational sideboard is really good against them. There is one thing I want to say in this matchup, which is, again, the Oddtog plus Disciple thing. Against most aggro decks, you can just like chain Moments Piece into one another and be totally fine, because they can't do anything to you. Like against Goblins, you have to pay attention to like Burn, but you're usually fine. And against Affinity, if you're just chanting Moments Pieces, eventually they're going to get this combo online, and they're going to kill you. So you need to get your Fangren out. But sometimes you need to get your Fangren out and make sure you can gain some life really quickly, because they can actually do something with the way the triggers work, where if they have, let's say, you're at 11 life, they have Oddtog and Disciple out, you untap, play your Fangren Marauder, and then pass the turn back to them, and then they play another artifact. They can then pass their turn, so that it's on your upkeep, and then sacrifice an artifact. And then before you gain 5 life, they can sacrifice another artifact. And so all the Disciples of Vault triggers will go on the stack, and so they can sacrifice all their stuff before you gain any life.
Oh.
So you need to be really careful about this, and make sure that you're out of like the way that, because another like 2 Disciple of Vaults will do the same thing. But then you can like double all their damage.
Yeah.
So you really have to be careful, because this situation doesn't come up as much as you think. Because usually, if you're at a position where like don't get hit with an Oddtog, then you haven't had time to get your Fangren down. something to be careful of. And so if you have the option playing your Fangren in there and tracking something, I would definitely do it.
Yes.
Especially if it's like the player and then any artifact.
If you run into Affinity without the ATOG Fling Disciple combo, you just win, right?
Yeah, that's just like agreed. Actually, I remember a time when, right before the ban dive, I was playing them, and I just was had my head in my head in my hands because I was just like watching as he drew a bunch of cards off what's it called?
Russian knowledge.
Yeah, he rushed for knowledge, and I was like, oh, it's over. And I think I must have kept the bad hand, so I just had like Forest, Island, and like Glimmerpost. And then I was just like, I can't win. And because he was just going to drop this Othog and have like a fling or something. He wasn't playing Othog. And so I was just able to change so many pieces into an actual victory. So, without Othog, they're like a slower aggro deck, and I'm totally fine playing against that. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, really just Othog Disciple, Othog Flinger. You really need to pay attention to. And if they can't assemble that, they aren't that likely to win into it. So.
Yeah. What do you find that Affinity brings in against you?
That's a funny one, because Affinity's like, especially before the ban, I couldn't even tell you like anything about Affinity because each 75 was just like radically different. They have access to cards in like every color. So I've been Duress, I've been Raised, I've been Ancient Grudge, I've been Hydro Blasted, I've been Hydro Blasted. It's just everything. And I think kind of the stock list now doesn't run Raised. Raised is actually like really annoying. Probably the best thing against
It's a lot to do if you have the shakiest mana base in the format in Affinity, and then you raise yourself. But
yeah. Now that I have Ancient Grudges, it's probably not as big of a deal. But I guess the thing I play around, I try to play around when I'm playing them is Hydro Blast, because you don't want to get a Compulsive Research thrown out if you need to draw cards. So, not that you really have a tremendous amount of options, but sometimes you can maybe try to like evoke a Mulldrifter or something, and they might counter it, or I don't know, something like that. Maybe I play around it mostly if I'm trying to use my wall, to be honest.
Yeah.
For something like that. So, I don't know. It's not that prevalent what they bring in, because I haven't really been impacted by it.
Okay. On to the next matchup.
Yeah. So mono green Stumpy.
Yep.
This match is like, I thought you took it. I think you beat them with mono green Stumpy. And I tend to find that like mono green Stumpy is one of my best matchups. I like really want to be playing mono green because they are like a pretty linear deck, and they don't really have much reach besides Pump. And I can pay attention to Pump and keep track of it. So, game one can be a little bit difficult, but with the two Moments pieces in the main deck and the Fangren Marauder, I've only lost to them once since the ban, and that was the other day.
Wow.
So, maybe twice. I don't know. It happens, but I know it's been twice since December. That's it. So,
I know for a fact that a lot of Simic Stormpost players do lose to Stompy.
Yeah, I know. It does happen. I think it's because they're keeping the wrong hand. They're not mulliganing aggressively. Like, I spend a lot of my deck, a lot of my games are at like 5 or 6 bucks.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that because it's not a big deal. I just need the right type of hand to beat that. I'm at a point where I honestly feel that Stompy can only beat me if they have a hand that's like turn 1 no sentinel, turn 2 like queer on ranger, and then the rest of their hand is pump, because they have to beat me so quickly before I can get my moment's peace chaining.
Yeah.
It just seems like a much more difficult task for them to accomplish than for me. So, and they often bring in sideboard cards like Thermal Karst or Fire Full Sanitize, right?
Yeah.
And in general, I don't really care about those. Like, they're like wasting a turn to face cast against me. So I find it very easy. I really enjoy playing that matchup because it often comes down to some point in which I'm like looking at the board and I'm thinking, how do I stay alive one more turn? And then maybe I'll like Temporal Fissure 3 and like turn my own Glimmerpost to like just stay at 1 life. And so they're always like really competitive games, and I can see people losing. Well, they play correctly, you play smart, and you just try to focus on staying alive as long as possible. Like against Puppy, you shouldn't be concerned about potion. You should just be concerned about staying alive, and then eventually you'll win. So that's what I do there. And did I say what I do to the sideboard?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I find that match extremely terrible.
What do you bring in? 2 piece.
Oh, I bring in 2 motion piece and 1 Fangren, and I take out 2 Chromatic Spheres and a Fissure.
All right.
The next.
Yep.
The next one's Delverfiend.
Yes.
And this matchup, when we first started playing it, it was favorable. So we had Hydro Blast in our sideboard because we were trying to beat some like catch some storm, off guard, shooting and plan destruction and Cloudpost. But the meta started to shift, and we've taken Hydro Blast out. So without the Hydro Blast, I actually think this match is slightly unfavorable. But because no one really plays this deck, it's not that big of a deal. And the last time I played them, I won anyway. It's just they need to draw well still.
Yeah.
And so I bring in 2 moments peace for Marauder, and I take out 3 shield spheres or Chromatic Spheres. And this matchup's a lot about playing your moments peace properly. So they need to cast a bunch of spells on a turn in order to get a good attack in to try to kill you. And they have bolt and they have spell. And these 2 cards are really difficult to play around because they're often attacking you for like 14 or something. And you need to make sure that your moment's peace resolves turn to reset their guys so they have to do it again next turn. And so sometimes it's right to not flashback their moment's peace from the graveyard. They're to just like recast another one. Just I guess this wouldn't. Sometimes it's just right to do it like mass purpose. But you really want to make sure that you can get through the spells. And I feel like they always have the spells. So that's something that they have to do. And Assault Shrub is the other thing that they attention to. Like, they can kill you from a really early point on. So you want to play really defensively to make sure that you keep moments to touch, even when you don't think you can possibly lose. So it's hard, but if it did get more popular, just add Hydro Blast and it'll be fine.
Do you know why Delverfiend isn't more popular?
Yeah, I think I do. I've played it myself, tried it out, and the threat ratio is not very high. So you have your Kiln Team and you have your Redragonaut. But first of all, Kiln Team is just like way better than Redragonaut. Plus 3 is so much bigger than the plus 2.
Yes.
But Kiln Team is pretty easy to deal with. Almost every deck has some way of interacting with it, whether it's like blocking it or just killing with the burn spell or something like that.
Yeah.
And the same kind of true with this is a deck that's like it's a lot like Hexproof Auras, except where Auras has like 12 guys they can play and win with. This deck has 8, and those 8 guys can actually be really easily interacted with. So I think if you want to play a deck like it probably makes more sense to play Auras.
Oh.
But Auras are easier for us because they don't have the spell.
Yeah. So what do you do against Hexproof?
So Hexproof is a lot like it's actually probably I want to say it's easier in Stompy because you don't have to think it hard. Their whole plan is like out there on the board. You're being attacked for 15, and you know how much it's going to be. You can take it if you're at 16. Like you just don't have to worry. And whereas with Stompy, if they're attacking for 15 and you're at 16, you really have to consider whether or not you want to like leave up a moment's peace that turn, because there's a good shot that they'll pump you or something. You know, so like it's harder to play around Stompy than Hexproof. But I think even Deluxeicoff was saying that this matchup's not very good for him, and I tend to agree. I really enjoy playing them because we bring in 2 Moment's Peace, 1 Fangren Marauder, and 2 Multani's Decree. You take out, I take out 1 Fissure, 1 Flicker, and 3 Spheres. And
what was that? 1 Fissure, 3 Spheres, and
a Flicker.
Yeah.
And again, you want to be Moment's Piecing, but you want to be, and maybe I should have said this about Stompy too, you want to maximize your life. Like, they don't have burn, so if you are being attacked for 15 against Stompy, you're at 16, you want to make them use a pump spell before you Moment's Peace, because this is another turn you can have if they don't try to kill you. And the same is true with Hexproof Auras. If you are going to go down to 1 life, who cares? You use that 1 life, you're still alive.
Yeah.
So then Moment's Peace the next turn. You want to maximize your life as much as possible, and so it's really important to Moment's Peace at the last possible moment. The other thing about Hexproof Auras that's really good for us is we have the Multani's Decree in the sideboard. Some people have used that instant spell one that says like destroy all green heart, maybe?
Yes.
And that's a good card. I prefer the decrees kind of more for just like humor than anything. I don't necessarily think one's better than the other.
Yeah.
But I enjoy casting Multani's Decree and then waiting as my opponent just like freezes as they see that like all of their permanents are now gone and I've just gained 15 life.
Shatterpaws.
Yeah, it's really like fun. It's like it's more trolling than anything. But I think the matchup's really favorable with the decrees. It's really quite good. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward matchup. Just try to survive and then do something dirty with the Fissure or a decree. And know that with Fissures, it's actually a better card than you think, because you can Fissure their lands and they have a bunch of enchant lands on their lands. So
Yeah.
you really can pull them. And they often don't have access to white readily, so if you return an Ethereal Armor or an Armadillo Cloak, it can buy you plenty of time.
Yeah, I bet. I was almost surprised that you spend these 2 sideboard slots on them with Multani's Decree.
That's actually a good point. I might change them out, especially with how little I run into Hexproof Auras these days.
Yeah, they've really taken a hit, and I think you are responsible, sir.
Could be. They also had some like cross ground with the green Fissure deck, not the post one, but just the one with enchant lands.
Yeah.
So it was good there too. But that deck has vanished completely.
I think you replaced it.
That could be. I think it's also really bad against Burn, and Burn is pretty prolific these days too.
Yes.
And our deck is that good. So I might as well talk about Burn since I'm saying.
Yes.
So Burn is a favorable matchup. I was actually talking to Pariah, who's a big Burn player.
He's the 13 Mountain Burn player.
Yeah. He played me and he won. I did get kind of screwed. Not to blame it on the shuffler, but it probably was the shuffler's fault. And I said I thought it was 75-25, and he said I think it's closer to 70-30, you guys. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So
Really?
I think it's 70-30 in our favor. I tend to bring in one Moment's Peace and one Fangren against them, and I take out one Fissure and one Sphere. Moment's Peace isn't that good against them because they don't have that many guys, really, that they're attacking with. They're trying to just burn you in the face, but you need the Moment's Peace in case they get the Kiln Fiend.
Yeah.
It's not too bad because sometimes they have the 3/3 guy with Vanishing.
Keldon Marauders.
Keldon Marauders, and then the Elemental, the 3/1 Trample Haste Elemental.
Yeah, Lava Elemental. I know.
Yeah.
I know what you speak of.
Yeah, and it's pretty good there because it's kind of like Game 3 like, is what it pretty much says. Like counter their burn spells.
Yeah.
And that's fine if you get two of those out of one card. Fissure is not that great against them. If I'm fissuring anything in that matchup, it's actually usually my own Glimmerposts.
Yeah.
And then on occasion I'll fissure, like I'll use it to slow down a Kiln Fiend or the little 1/1 Goblin guy who pings.
Yes.
But in general,
I'm really surprised actually. I thought that because Burn has been so there's so much Burn decks around right now, and I did 4-0 daily myself 2 days ago with Burn, and I beat Simic Stormpost. So I thought that the Burn was there because of Simic Stormpost.
it's actually like it's a more difficult matchup than it seems like it should be. And I think the first couple times I ever played against Burn, I lost, and I thought it was a bad matchup. But then I realized that there's like a couple things you can do to make it a lot better. And the first is make sure you keep hands in which you can get your posts. Like getting your posts is so huge in this matchup, like over anything, because you need to gain as much life as possible. And drawing cards is almost like not as important as just like getting life, because eventually they're like every time they cast a burn spell, they go down a card. Like there's no value. The value is gone after the burn has been used.
Yes.
So if you can just like last them, usually till they get to 4 mountains, you usually win. And then you can start you'll start drawing stuff. And so I usually make sure that I can get out maybe 2 Cloudposts before my first Glimmer. You really want to make sure that you get your Cloudposts out first. But make sure you have access to your Glimmerpost if you ever need it. And then another huge card in this matchup is Ghostly Flicker. If you can cast that, it's really great. You gain like 8 life off of it usually, sometimes 12. And then it's over.
Yes.
Making sure you crop rotation is really important to do at the right time. Because sometimes they'll if they think you have a crop rotation, they'll hang on to a burn spell until you rotate. You want to be rotating in response to their trying to kill you.
Yes.
Usually if you get Fangren down, the game's just over. You can crack Fangren down and crack something.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of all for that matchup.
Yes.
Mono White is, I would say this matchup is like probably our best. I've literally never lost to them, ever. Sideboard in 2 Moment's Peace, 1 Fangren, and take out 3 Spheres. Again, it is kind of weird that like you're taking out artifacts that can sacrifice and bring in a Marauder, but if you think back to like I was saying with history, they used to be explorers, and so I still think about them as explorers. And I would bring Fangren in this matchup, even with just 4 Chromatic Stars.
Yes.
It's so good. This is a matchup again where like everything they're gonna do is out on the table. Like you know how much reach they have, and so if you can go down to 1 line, and if they have like a Javelineer, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
You have no problem doing it, and maximize your life as best as you can. And then fissuring them really hurts them, especially because they will at some point have probably Moment's Journey or Mulldrifter or something. Then you get to draw 2 cards.
Oh.
And really the one thing you need to be careful of, and I saw this happen to Mike K in one of his videos, and it's something I try to pay attention to, is after you fissure them, if they have like a Guardian of the Guild backed out, you can't fissure that. So you'll return a bunch of cards to their hands, and then they'll discard. They might discard a Prismatic Strands. So you got to be careful. And this isn't that big of a deal, but just make sure you have access to your like a wall, and then you can torch them. They'll use their strands or something, and then torch them again. So it takes a little bit longer, but just be aware of it so that you don't mess up your wall. Goblins, I guess we'll go on.
Yes.
So goblins, pretty much the same as Stompy, in a lot of ways. It's about the same percentage matchup. I know that I think people probably have just plenty of trouble with it, just because you don't play aggressively enough. If you're using aggro decks, you're not playing aggressively enough. And so in this matchup, I'll add 2 fadeaways, 2 moments piece, a Fangren Marauder. I'll take out 2 fissures and 3 Chromatic Spheres. And
But you didn't bring Fadeaway in against Stompy, did you?
No, I'll explain why. So, in general, you want Fadeaway against decks that have more creatures than lands. And so, Goblins is a perfect example of this. Like, they'll play like 2 lands and like 12 Goblins. And so, it's basically like a Wrath of God against them.
Yes.
Now, it's the same way against Delver too. Like the really aggressive Delver decks, they'll have 3 lands out. They'll always keep 2 of the lands out and still play guys somehow. But eventually you'll be able to fade away and you'll wrath them. The thing that's problematic against Stompy is that they have things they want to sacrifice actively or don't want to sacrifice or don't mind sacrificing.
Yeah.
Since fade away lets you sacrifice any permanent, they can sacrifice their young wolves, which you probably haven't killed because you have no reason to, and their rancors.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I've found that after like bringing in some fadeaways, it doesn't often do all that much. You don't kill like 1 guy,
And then you activate their Hunger of the Howl packs.
Yeah, exactly. It's not very helpful against them.
Makes sense.
And you could bring it in against mono white, you just don't need it.
Yeah.
I found it. So, if you were playing a deck that gets creatures out ahead of the land, then I think it's a pretty reasonable choice to go with fadeaway. So like I saw someone playing Slivers against Slivers, and they brought in fadeaway. And I thought that was pretty reasonable because they had like 2 lands that they were casting a bunch of guys out.
Yeah.
That's when I want fadeaway. And so with goblins, like fadeaway is a tiny bit risky because they can have the Pyroblast for it. But it's so powerful against them. It just really blows them out if you can time it well.
Yes.
And you want to save your moments because again, till the last possible moment, but playing around burn. So be aware that they can have like 7 points of burn. So I usually go down to like 8 is where I'm comfortable with them.
It must be a lot harder to tell than against Stompy.
It is. It's definitely trickier. But the thing about goblins is they tend to tap out on their first main phase. So Because they have their cohorts and their conscripts that they have out, so they need to be casting guys on their first main phase in order to attack you.
Yeah.
And when you want to be moment speaking anyway, so usually after like a bushwhacker or something like that. So they do a lot of stuff on their first main phase, so they're often tapped out. So you have to play around Fire Blast at that time. So if you're at like 5 life, if you know you can gain some life back on your turn, you're probably fine. You know, like you have to be careful. And so I would say this matchup is slightly worse than Stompy, just because it requires a little bit more thinking.
Okay.
But it's good. And so I guess the next one I want to talk about is blue-red Cloudpost. I'll talk about blue-red Cloudpost and blue-black Cloudpost because they're kind of the same thing.
Yes. Especially for you, I bet.
Yeah. So with my sideboard for the blue-red, I bring in 2 Tilling Treefolk, 2 Deep Analysis, and I take out 2 moments to use Fangren in the Sphere. Are you trying to play in the daily? Just out of curiosity.
No, this is much more fun actually, so let's keep talking. Okay. If it's okay with you.
Yeah, it's fine. I should probably do my other stuff anyway.
Okay.
So the blue-red Cloudpost deck is, like I said before, just like defy game 1. Like they just don't even. There's nothing they can do. Really.
It must be the case against any control deck almost.
Yeah, pretty much.
They sit there with all their creature removal, and you just fissure them away.
Yeah, basically. He's just got all his flame flashes in hand and can't really do much with them. Like, you can play a Mulldrifter, but if he wants to kill it, okay, fine. And see, I've won, like, every time I'm like, oh man, I have to mold a 4. Like, I'm usually playing, like game 1, I have no idea who I'm playing against. I mold a 4, I'm like, oh god, I lose this unless I play Cloudpost. And then they're playing Cloudpost, and I'm like, oh sweet, and then I just win. It's
yeah.
Like, got your lands, and then you're fine. You just win eventually. Game 2 is actually, against the blue-red one, is actually kind of hard. Because they'll often, I feel like every time game 2, they have like double Cloudpost just naturally into like Prophetic Prism on turn 2 and then like Earth Rift here on turn 4. And land destruction can be annoying once it gets to like, it like slows you down, which is annoying at first. And if they have enough land destruction where they can draw more into it because you're moving slower, then it becomes really problematic. Sometimes they just have like 4 stone rains, and that's not that big of a deal. Because they'll blow up like 1 land, maybe another one, but you'll get your Cloudpost online eventually, and you'll get your Tilling Treefolk, but the Earth Rift on the play on turn like 3 or 4 is really devastating, because the Earth Rift represents 2 land destruction spells in 1, right? So
Yes.
Game 2 is actually like probably 55-45 in our favor.
Oh.
Game 1 is like 100%. Game 2 is 55-45 in our favor. But then Game 3 bounces back up to like 90%. So
that much of a difference. Wow.
Yeah, like having the play is huge with land destruction. Because it's, if you can like get out another Cloudpost, it's just so crippling for them. Like, they have to keep you off your Cloudpost completely.
Yes.
And having an extra turn to go and get another Cloudpost is pretty good. So.
And their problem is that you have 12 Cloudposts.
Yeah, I have 12 Cloudposts.
And they have 4.
And some of them I can just get back with Tilling Treefolk.
Yeah.
Tilling Treefolk's pretty awesome in this matchup too, because they tend to board out a lot of their creature removal. So Tilling Treefolk will like get in there and just kind of sit around, blow up some of your lands, and they'll find that they're in a good position to beat you. And then you'll Ghostly Flicker your Tilling Treefolk and then just do it again.
Yeah.
He's a really good man. Again, you can cycle lands with him, and make sure that you remember that you can crop rotation Cloudpost to do capsize. That's like, I would, yeah, like I just like based on it, and capsizing for a couple turns in a row. I'm like, oh yeah, I can stop this from happening.
Yeah.
So remember that, and just play carefully with against them, because it is games 2 and 3 are a lot harder than game 1, that's for sure. So use your crop well and go through quicker as well.
Yeah.
And really the only thing that you can do against you as like a defensive measure besides going at your land is they can go through quicker. So remember that too. They can always go through quicker their lands. I feel like that's all of that one. Same basically goes for the blue-black one.
Yeah.
I saw a little split differently there. Actually, no, I don't. Never mind.
Okay.
I think that's the same. I think that's the wrong one. And then I'll talk about
The black control decks, perhaps.
Other control.
Mono black control or blue black control decks.
So mono black control is pretty favorable matchup. Their lists they change a lot. So I played one the other day that actually was really insane against blue. It had like the perfect amount of land destruction, the perfect amount of discard, and the perfect amount of break card. And this like trio eventually can get you. But in general, it's a really good matchup. I usually bring in 2 Deep Finale, 2 Tilling Treefolk, and I take out a Fangren and 2 Spears. So their main plan, right, is to get you to discard. Well, as long as you're discarding appropriately, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, because you're going to draw a bunch of cards with this one. That's what it does.
Yeah.
If you're at a point where you have 0 cards in hand, or you have 1 card in hand and it's like Chromatic Star, play your Chromatic Star, because they're going to try to make you discard no matter what's in your hand, and then you can save it for the next turn.
Yes.
So that's important. The only cards, creatures you have to worry about particularly are the Shinobi.
Okay, Bagang. Yeah.
That guy is really annoying. Not as annoying as Ninja Use powers. But you know if he's coming usually, and I often will try to save a torch for him if I have one early, and I know he's coming. Also, Moment Piece does stop him from making a restart, so that's something to note.
Yes.
And when I fissure, I'm usually fissuring their lands, because they do have 1 piece of roots in Corrupt and in Cryptra.
Yeah.
So I'm usually fissuring their lands to try to keep them off 6 mana, and any like I might return a Shinobi if I'm going to return a bunch of their lands too. It's a pretty good matchup. It feels a lot. It plays out a lot like Delver. If you're struggling with Delver, maybe try like playing with your friend who's got like mono black, crack, and you'll start to see that there's a lot of like similarities here in the way you need to play. And then another thing to keep in mind too is sometimes I have Mind Wrench, which is to discard 2 unless you discard artifacts. Sometimes it's not that bad to keep a Star or a Spear in your hand.
Yep.
And the other games will bring in land destruction usually, which is why the Tilling Treefolk's there. And we take the Fangren out because we have so much removal. They even move the removal in after.
Yeah.
Sideboard. So I'll go on to mono blue control.
Yes.
Like the big one I was talking about with the tons of counterspells. And that one is one where I actually take out Fangren, I take out 2 Moment Piece, and I add a Tilling Treefolk and 2 Deep Analysis.
Oh.
This is a matchup where it's all about playing land. You just want to keep your land draw. Eventually you're going to get so much mana that you can just cast a bunch of card draw spells in a single turn. And they just can't keep up with your card drawing ability. So it's just really difficult for them. And they can't counter your Temporal Fissure if you go off. And you're usually going off on their lands.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty easy matchup. You can lose it for sure if you don't hit your land out, but it's probably 75-25.
Yeah, I believe you. Any other control decks? No, they all play about the same.
Yeah. I would pretty much treat the Trinket control decks you guys have been running as the blue black Cloudpost deck, basically.
You should probably treat it like mono black control, because it has a lot more similarities with mono black control. In that it's basically a mono black control deck with blue for card draw.
I've seen a lot of decks that are like blue black tempo-ish and stuff like that. It's hard to know exactly what my opponent's list is.
Exactly.
I don't see it too often. So, but yeah, I think that it's kind of control-y-ish, rapid. So maybe you have just one moment piece there or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Have you played against Infect after the bans?
No, but I imagine if I did play against Infect, I would still lose, no matter what the version was. That was like a matchup where it was. I think I won one time out of like 100 matches against them.
Oh my, yeah.
And it really required him mulling the 4 bolts and doing off.
I could see you chaining moments pieces until you get the torch mana against Infect.
Yeah, that could happen, and the one time I won that did happen, and I talked to someone else who did Infect once, and they said that's what they did. You have to get really, really lucky to do that.
Yeah.
When you're chaining moments pieces against a lot of decks, it's, at some point you're playing Glimmerpost, and so you can usually take like a turn off if you've gained enough life back that they can attack you again. But with Infect, like, you can't take a turn off with moment piecing. You have to keep doing it.
Yes.
So, and they were so fast, like 3-ban, that it was just impossible. Post-ban, they're probably just they're fast enough. And then might as well talk about the mirror.
Yes.
I'll talk about other creature decks, and I guess that'd be about it.
Yep.
I'll talk about elves first.
Okay.
That's the last one I have here. Elves is one that I think actually could be problematic in the future. And I think it's kind of a weird one. If it came without rose in popularity, I would add Swirling Sandstorm to my sideboard. The red 3-colorless for a card that has it has just Threshold, and it's 5 damage from the creature without blind. So that's the change I would make. But currently, it's about a 45-55 matchup, like 40 somewhere around there. It's not that great. I bring in fadeaways, moments piece. So 2 fadeaways, 2 moments piece. I take out a Fissure, a Flicker, and 2 Chromatic Spheres. And the reason why this is not that good of a matchup is they're pretty fast. They're fast going off. I can't ever counter their card draw, and eventually they're going to get their card draw. And Moments Piece doesn't always keep them down because they occasionally have Mob Justice. So they'll dig through the entire deck and then burn me out. And that's really problematic. And so the closest thing I can do to dealing with that is fadeaway. And if they're unfamiliar with what my deck does, I can usually get them with fadeaway. But if they are smart, they'll just leave up Priest of Titania.
Yeah.
Which like instantly stops the fadeaway since they have 1 mana for each one of their guys. So Elves is kind of a tricky matchup. I think it can be made better with some sideboard tweaks if you need to do it. Currently, they're not enough of a threat for me to care.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I'll go to the mirror.
Okay.
So I found myself about 60-40 against the mirror. Obviously, it should be 50-50, but I think it just has to do with a lot of like play style things and choices people make. And so the first thing I want to say is, like, again, talking about Reap and Sow, I don't think it's that good of a card, even in the mirror. It can really, unless you Reap and Sow and leave up a third green so that you can crop rotation, or a blue and 2 colorless mana so that you can ghostly flicker, you're really making a big, taking a really big risk if you're cashing it into your opponent's board if they have any open mana. And they could crop rotation, because this matchup is all about who can trigger the other person first.
Yeah.
Since there's no like Cloud of Fairies or Explorers in anyone's lists anymore, once you get fissured in this matchup, it's like over. So you want to be going really aggressively, digging as much as you can. But if you know that you can't go off on a certain turn, try to leave up some mana so that you can crop rotation or ghostly flicker so that you can go off the next turn. It's a interesting matchup. I actually have a lot of fun playing it because it's crop rotation and ghostly flicker provide for a certain amount of like defense.
Yeah.
But I find that on the draw, I bring in 1 Tilling Treefolk and 3 Ancient Grudges, and I take out 2 Moment Piece, a Fangren, and a Sphere. On the play, I'll bring in 2 Tilling Treefolk, 2 Ancient Grudges, 2 Moments, and take a 2 Moments Piece, a Fangren, and a Sphere. And the reason for this distinction is because these matchups are so like mana intensive, and you have to go as fast as you possibly can. If they do kill me on the play, that actually puts your play. But if they can just turn 4 or turn 3 or something, Reap and Sow me, then they'll probably have enough time to go find a Temporal Fissure. So Tilling Treefolk's not like the greatest here, because I'm probably going to be dead by the time I get back. But a lot of people, in order to get to points where they can be really aggressive, will do some funny stuff with their mana. They'll just sacrifice all their colored lands, just getting Cloudpost, and playing Prism. So sometimes you can Ancient Grudge their Prisms away, and then they've lost all colorless sources. And an Ancient Grudge is just better than Moments in this matchup. That's why I bring it in. And then on the play, or if I'm on the play, then Tilling Treefolk's a little bit better, because if I ever have to sacrifice Cloudpost to a crop rotation or something like that, then I'm gonna probably have plenty of time to cast the Tilling Treefolk and then get my Cloudpost back.
Yeah.
So it's a fun matchup, but you gotta play it right. It's more about just like getting your figure off and how many counts you have with it. Because if you can just return the Cloudpost, which gives you like a retreat, you've got enough. And actually, I should mention one more thing I don't think I have about it. And this applies to any of the Cloudpost matchups. Their mana, their Glimmerpost and their Cloudpost count towards your mana, and vice versa. So if they have 3 Glimmerposts and you have a Cloudpost, you have access to 4 mana. And so in these matchups, you don't want to be playing Glimmerpost until a turn you're going off, because you're going to be helping your opponent. So I try to make sure I don't play my Glimmerpost. Sometimes in these mirrors, I'll even just discard them, because you don't want to be helping your opponent out.
Yeah.
So the next one is the Mono Blue Fissure Post.
Yes.
And I think this matchup is favorable. The thing that's trickiest about it for me is actually determining what they are. So they'll go Island, Preordain, and then like Cloudpost on turn 2, and then like Seagate Oracle, and I'm like, oh, I'm playing Cloudpost, I just haven't found the red mana yet. And so I'll be like a little bit like playing counter spells and going a little bit slower, and suddenly they'll cast like Cloud of Fairies and just figure me out. And I'll be like, what? I did not expect that at all. And so if I know what my opponent is doing, our deck gets online faster than theirs. We have crop rotations and plus the maps and the Cloudpost, and they just have the crop rotations. and sorry, they just have the map with Cloudpost. So we get online faster. And so I think we're generally doing more explosive stuff than they are. If you have Reap and Sow, this would actually be one matchup I think it's actually quite good in. And maybe this matchup gets so popular, I don't know. But this is where I would want to go if they land. And one other thing to keep in mind is that they can play a Cloudpost if you fissure them and you return everything built like an island. They can play a Cloudpost tap. I guess maybe an island, 2 islands. You missed 2 islands. They'll play a Cloudpost tap, but then they can play their Cloudpost and untap their tap Cloudpost. So just because you fissure them does not mean that you have won the game like it does against the blue-green one. They can recover from it, and so you really, like, this is the time where you are digging to fissure them, and then fissure them again, and then you are trying to lock them. Like, this is one of the, like, against them, I am doing my best to try to play combo. I'm trying to be aggressive, but I'm trying to lock them, for sure. If I can fissure them, great. I mean, if I can Kaervek torch them, great. And usually we have access to Kaervek torch, and they don't. And we get all the mana off their land. So always keep it in mind that if they have a couple of Cloudposts, you have a couple of Cloudposts, you might just win. It's a scary matchup for sure, because at any time they can just, like, do a bunch of infinite stuff. But I definitely think it's in our favor. If they don't find that Cloudpost within the first couple turns, we got them.
Yeah.
And then the same. So against them, I bring in 2 Ancient Grudges and Deep Analysis, and I take out the Moment Speed. I'm not really sure how good Deep Analysis is against them. I'm sort of like here right now. But the Grudges are pretty good too. They like to play Prophetic Prism as well. So they can rely on that a little too heavily.
I found that when I played the deck, the Mono-Blue Stormpost deck, I had you were always low on blue mana. You were always the amount of blue mana you had that limited what you could do. So you were really reliant on the prisms.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that blowing up a prism is bigger against them. And if you can catch a map on, say, turn 1, like Glimmerpost map, and you had already played like a Star on turn 1,
yeah,
and you can pull off their map, you have set them back so badly, because they are so much worse at getting online than we are.
Yes.
So that's really big, and I do like the Grudges there. So against the other fissure decks, these are actually really bad matchups. The blue green Enchant Fissure, which, like I said, doesn't really exist anymore. That's like 10% win rate. Which is what I'll do is I'll bring in 2 Treefolk and take out 2 Moment Speed.
Yeah.
The reason why this is such a bad matchup is because these decks are, their purpose is to combo. Their purpose is to go as fast as possible into the fissure. And so they're actually a little bit better at it than we are. And not only that, they have the ability to do kind of what the last deck I was talking about does, and they can play Closet Fairies to, like, untap or tap lands and do a bunch of stuff and get a bunch of mana off very few lands. So if you fissure them, it's not over always. It usually is, but not always. And so when I had Ulamog Crusher, this matchup was like, you can win it. But now that I don't play those anymore, it's like really miserable. And they usually have land destruction in their sideboard. So they have this new engine of, like, Thermal Karst your Cloudpost, then you crop rotate it or something, and then they'll play Mnemonic Wall and get back their Thermal Karst, and then blow up your another land. So they can bring in fissures, or issue a fissure, they can do land, like recurring land destruction. So it's it's really not a good matchup, and I'm kind of glad it's gone.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it's not a good matchup, but I had the choice, of playing this deck over their deck, and I chose to continue to play this one because even though they beat us, we beat the meta better than they do. So I think that's why this deck is the blue-green Stormpost is still around, and they're not, is because we have this better game against everyone else.
Yes.
And the same is kind of...
what about Familiar Storm?
Yeah, so they're kind of the same. They don't have access to land destruction, which is nice. And I can bring in for like kind of an alternative strategy. I can bring in 2 Fade Away and take out 2 Moments Peace against them. And my plan here in general is to try to Fissure off before them. And they're like a little bit slower, I think, than blue-green ones.
Okay.
In my opinion. So that little bit of extra speed is really nice for us because we can try to fissure their land. Like, all you want to do is fissure their land. So then you can Fade Away and then make them sacrifice all their creatures.
Of course.
So that's like the approach I go with them. But again, without Crusher, this matchup's a lot harder. And one of the really annoying things they can do, and they often do, is their smart players, is they'll leave a Terramorphic Expanse uncracked for several turns. So if you want to try to fissure them, you're not going to get one of their lands. If you target the Terramorphic Expanse, or sacrifice it and then go find their basic, and then they can untap it and do stuff. So they're always going to have some land you can't fissure into their hand if they're playing smart.
Yeah.
And this is actually really problematic because, again, they can, like, if you can't fissure all of their permanents besides this one thing, they're going to be able to tap, like, if they have a familiar left that you couldn't get, then they'll go find like an island, tap the island, play one of their bounce lands or bounce lands, and then try to go off any ways and get you back.
Oh.
So their Terramorphic 3-color mana base is like a blessing and a curse for them. Sometimes they just like can't handle it and draw terrible, but other times like having the access to Terramorphic Expanse is actually really good defense for them. So they're kind of tough, and I'm glad that they're not more prevalent as well, because they're pretty difficult. But I guess to like summarize these matchups, aggro, control, I have very little difficulty with. They're not as good as they used to be. People are figuring out how to play against this deck. But either of those types of strategies I'm usually pretty happy with. If I'm playing against Delver or Affinity, I feel like I'm probably slightly favored against both of them because maybe I've played the deck enough to know the ins and outs better than they do. And maybe other people don't feel similarly about it, but I feel like it's good against pretty much every type of deck in the meta besides other types of Storm deck and Elves.
Yeah. Well, I think you're very correct in that, and I think you have created quite a monster for the meta.
Yeah.
Do you think that the deck will continue to grow and that there will possibly be a banning in the future?
Well, if people like start playing more aggressively with this deck, I think it actually could stick around. I feel like it kind of might have been one of those things where people saw the list, got really excited about it, so everyone started trying it, it really exploded, but then people haven't been playing it very well yet. They're struggling against certain matchups they shouldn't be, and they're starting to get conclusions that the deck is worse than it is. Because I think it's actually a lot harder to play than people think.
I think I agree. My friend who is playing Stompy, HR Caldera, to some success, he said he was 6-4 in dailies against Simic Stormpost with Stompy.
Yeah, he actually beat me. He was the one.
He did?
The last guy. Yeah. So I got him with goblins, I think, the time before or something like that. Beat him with something. I don't know.
Okay.
He might have been playing Stompy, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I remember he said something like, "Oh, we meet again." And I was like, "Okay." But yeah, I think people might have like the wrong conclusions about it because the deck looks like it should be really easy to play, but it's more difficult than you think. And so if people start to improve with it, I think it definitely could lead to a banning. And if not, I definitely think that like the shift looks like people are going to try the mono blue version. I would expect pretty soon. And if that takes off, then I think a ban could too.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what they would ban, to be honest, because I feel like they're not going to ban Cloudpost, even though people want them to. And I don't think Temporal Fissure is really that busted of a card in this deck.
Could you see the deck functioning without the fissure?
Yeah, I do actually. I think Temporal Fissure is really necessary in control matchups, but not necessary in aggro matchups.
Yeah.
So if there's enough like moments peak, if you had like just some other fog or something, like fit is another pretty decent option. You could just like fog indefinitely. So aggro I think will always stay under wraps, but and maybe Reap and Sow. I've seen some lists that like just play like Reap and Sow instead of Fissure.
Oh.
And so it's kind of like the mono green post deck, but more like I don't know, like a combination of fogging and land destruction.
Yeah.
And I think something like that could survive if Temporal Fissure was banned, but it certainly would be much worse back. It'd be like if banning Invigorate for effect, probably. So it's like, yeah, it might make it unviable.
Yeah. Well, that was quite a walkthrough. Thank you very much. Before we end, do you have any people you want to thank, or do you want to plug something or something like that?
Yeah, so first I just want to say thanks to Turbo 3000. He's helped a lot out with the deck designs. I actually saw him once playing in a 2-man, and he was playing the same deck. And I think he came up with a list like independently of me, and he seemed like, which I think is totally possible. He had some different options in the deck than me. I started talking to him, and he was like, "Oh, I came up with this deck too." So, I mean, I don't want to like say that it was possible other people came up with this list as well, but it was good working with someone else coming at it from a fresh angle. And he's provided plenty of insight into the current iteration. Another person I want to thank is Magic Player 298234. He's my clan leader, and he was a big goblin player, so he recommended the Fadeaway. It's just a card to beat them, and then later on I realized how good it is again. It's really aggressive Delver deck. And then a couple other people too. My friend Lost MTGO. Another guy I met along the way who's a pretty good brewer is RBMZ. And another friend of mine, GertBeef42. And I want to thank Mikey K159 for shouting me out on a lot of his recordings and articles and stuff on his podcast. So. And if you want to reach me, you can find me on MTGO, ShaffaWaffa5. I'm willing to talk to anyone, provide any advice, specific stuff. Or you can find me on Twitch too. I think it's just twitch.tv/ShaffaWaffa5. I've been trying to stream more, and I'll try to keep it up.
All right. Thank you very much for creating this fantastic deck and for this interview.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I really wanted to because I I want this deck to stick around, and I think it will if people maximize the potential. So thanks again for giving me this opportunity.
I am quite sure it will, and I really hope we don't run into each other in dailies if I play Control.
Well, if we do, I'll say hi. And so thanks again for letting me write to you guys too.
Oh,
by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we should mention that. You have written a couple of very good articles on the site. I think I said this in the first 30 seconds of this video before you came online. But here, on MTGeostrat, David is now writing a series called Thoughtcast, which contains very good insight into the Pauper format. So that's required reading for anyone.
Well, thanks for the plug too. Yeah, I just wanted to share some ideas with people because I've been playing for quite a while now, and I have made a lot of decks that have gone nowhere, and so I've started thinking recently, like, why is that? And these are kind of the conclusions I've come to.
Oh. They were very good, really. I learned a lot about the Pauper format actually just reading this that I didn't think about before. So.
Well, yeah, I'm glad. Hopefully I'll be able to pump out the Control one pretty soon.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that. Well, see you soon again, and thank you.
Yeah, take care, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.